Hello everybody and welcome to the predictions video for the Rurouni Kenshin Feature Festival. It is the event that is going to be coming up after the end of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Feature Festival, and I think this is the most legwork I've put into a predictions video in some time, because I've gone back and I've read the entire arc. This focuses on the Remembrance arc and the Jinshu arc, which are the final arcs of Kenshin proper. There are spin-offs, there are continuations, but as far as the main story and the way it ended back in the late 90s, this is the end of Kenshin. So if you haven't read Kenshin and you at some point plan on doing so, you should know there are going to be spoilers in this video, quite heavy spoilers for basically the entirety of the series. Just a fair warning to anybody that hasn't read it yet. But the main focus is, of course, the Jinshu arc, because the Remembrance arc is a flashback arc, and it sort of appears in the middle of the Jinshu arc, and a lot happens in it, but I wouldn't say there's a lot of candidates for new characters in it. And as for the Jinshu arc, there is a lot of stuff that you could make into an event. So it's a little bit hard to pick and choose, but I think I've made some good choices here. I'm going to lay it out in the way that they would normally do it in the actual event proper, which would be sort of in chronological order. Not necessarily of how it's happening in the series, but of how it'll be released in the game. And I've aimed for 8 characters and a legend summon, and the reason I've gone for that is because I know we only got 7 with no legend summon during Yu-Gi-Oh! As I mentioned in the Yu-Gi-Oh! News video, I really do think that is because they needed to design sprites for all the Dawn monsters. It takes considerably more time. You know, you think about how much effort must have gone into making Osiris, into making Ra, technically Obelisk, even though we didn't see that during this event. That unit is finished and it is going to come out later this year. Plus you have all of the monsters that all the other characters use, so it's a bit tricky. But with this event, it's a lot more straightforward. It's, you know, just mostly just dude with a sword. So I think they can stretch to 8. I think they can do 8 and a legend summon. I think that would be fine. And I start off with the limited. I think the limited is going to be Kenshin. And I've said before, I do think it's a little boring when a series only really has the main character as a limited, because it would be cool to see other options. There's not really a better pick for this. Out of the people who could possibly be a limited, you would only really say Kenshin, Sonosuke, then maybe Yahiko. And then beyond that, Aoshin, Saito, and then there's no one else really you would say as a candidate, unless we're looking at dark heroes. But I don't think that's going to happen this event. So I think it'll be Kenshin, and it'll be from the final fight against Anishi, who is the antagonist of this arc, and sort of the final antagonist of the series. This technically is a little bit weird because he uses the technique Amakakeru no Hirameki, which is sort of his go-to for a lot of the series, but it's supposed to be like the big bang, the special technique of Hiten Mitsurugi Ryu. But this is the last time he really uses it, and it's the time he does it properly. I didn't really know how to word that, but it'll be Amakakeru no Hirameki, which of course we already have version 1 Kenshin who uses the exact same special attack, but this will be, well, at least a lot flashier. I mean, I don't know, it's definitely a worthy moment of being a limited because it is his final battle, so fair enough. Then for the standard gacha, I've gone for 3 standard gacha, and I think this is a solid way to sort of round out Kenshin. Like, you could go back and have other characters here and there pop up in maybe ensembles, but I have a feeling this is going to be our last Kenshin Feature Festival. And as such, I've chosen 3 characters that I think sort of sort us out for that. So number 1 is a new Myojin Yahiko. I think this is unavoidable. This is his biggest arc. And yes, the version of Yahiko we already have, his panel is technically from this arc already. But I think that's just a case of, you know, he came out so long ago, they weren't really thinking about that. Same thing with Kenshin, the first Kenshin using Amekakururu Yuno Hirameki. They weren't really thinking about, we want this to be an early in the series version of whoever. They just kind of put together a version of the character. So this version of Myojin Yahiko, very much looking forward to seeing him added, because the one we've got is not great. The one we've got is a free-to-play. Well, no, he's technically gacha, but he's a 3-star, and you can evolve him to 6. This would be a 6-star unit, or a 5-star, 6-star unit, and hopefully good. And I'm imagining he will be a mini version of Kenshin. When I say a mini version, in any events we've had in the past, quite often there will be a limited character that counters a catastrophe event, and then there will also be a standard gacha unit that, while will not mirror all of the things that the limited does, will in some way work in the same way as the limited to help defeat the catastrophe stage. Whether that be they both have the same sort of resistances, whether they have the same sort of bypasses or boosted damage. Typically there is some sort of similarity between the two, and they've done that in the Yu-Gi-Oh event with Yugi and Taya. Taya, or Anzu, technically she's not like anywhere near as good as Yugi, and she also, her kit is not really exactly the same, but it gets the job done. And a lot of the time on those stages, even if the kit is nowhere near as good as the limited, because those units get buffed on those stages and they do still counter some of the gimmicks, they're still pretty good for it. And I think, you know, Yahiko being a mini Kenshin makes a whole load of sense considering this arc, considering how this arc ends and how all the stories tie up at the end of Kenshin. So I'm pretty happy with that pick, and I think most people would be happy with that pick. Next up, we have version 2, Sonosuke Sagara. He has quite a big arc here. You know, we learn a lot about his backstory, about the stuff that I mean, we knew some backstory elements, but before even those elements, where he came from, where his roots are, and who he is as a person. And it's a bit of a shame. I think if you read Kenshin, if you read some of the author's notes, you will see that Watsuki basically said that there were certain parts of the story where it felt like he wanted to lead up to a big moment for that character, and when it got to the final battle against Anishi for Kenshin, he didn't really have any counterparts for everybody else. And I think he'd kind of already done that earlier in the arc, having each character have somebody they face off against. So it kind of ended up with them not really getting their big moments in the same way that they might have got in previous arcs. But I'm happy that we at least got some of Sonosuke's backstory, and I'm happy with putting him as the second gacha unit. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm thinking Kenshin being yellow and Yahiko being yellow, I want to say that Sonosuke would be green. A, because I think as a tank he makes a lot of sense, and green units tend to be tanks more often than other types. I might not be 100% correct on that, but historically that's what I've noticed. Quite often you will find a tank and they will be green. And I think also it would make a lot of sense to have coverage for all 4 types among the 4 people going to help Kenshin. So there are more people there, but I mean the 4 main fighters are Aoshi, Hajime Saito, Yahiko, and Sonosuke. And so we've already got Saito, who is blue, and we've already got Aoshi, who is red. We're talking about the versions of them from not necessarily this particular arc with Saito, but definitely with Aoshi. But those two versions are the red and the blue. And then I would say Sonosuke being green and Yahiko being yellow rounds us out, one of each type. They don't always do stuff like that in this game. You know, I don't think it's something they necessarily consider. But I think considering how their stories end in this arc, I've actually thought about an event for that, which we'll talk about later. It would make sense for each of them to be a different type. And now, finally, the third gacha unit, Makimachi Miso, who I think I predicted a few times coming to the game and hasn't come. And this isn't a very strong arc for her. Like, she's there, and that's about it. And I think there are a lot of moments in the series where she's just kind of there, and that's about it. But she does play an important role, nonetheless. And she's definitely worthy of being a gacha unit and being in the game, at least. I could definitely see them doing a 2-character gacha and moving her to an event. But I would say if we're doing 8 characters, you're not going to do 2 limiteds for this event. So realistically, 3 standard gacha I think does make a lot of sense. We'll see what they decide. In the end, we'll see what they decide. And then for the first event, I've gone with a Transcendent class event, which is Hyogo Kujiranami, which is the opponent that shows up early in the arc and then disappears for a bit and then comes back later to fight Yahiko. So he's going to be blue to be countered by Yahiko. And honest, as far as a playable character, he probably wouldn't have been my first choice. But I think he makes sense because you need one of Yahiko's big moments to be an event. That's my personal opinion. And also, it's a little bit tricky because a lot of the characters that are introduced in this arc kind of just appear and then don't do much, and then like they're in a fight or whatever, but once they're done, they're done. Anishi is the main goal throughout. So there is other characters like Gain, who definitely could have been in this event, but I don't even know how they would do it, and I don't even know who would counter them, and it's really tricky because his final moments technically are against Aoshi, and we already have that version of Aoshi in the game, so I don't think they're going to make him an event. So Kujiranami, maybe not the strongest pick for a Transcendent class event, but it's a Transcendent class event, so it doesn't matter that much. And then we also have an Ultimate class event for Yukishiro Anishi, who I think does make sense to have an Ultimate class followed by a Catastrophe. That was something that was suggested to me, but I also have kind of thought about it afterwards a little bit and decided this current event, this Yu-Gi-Oh event, has felt like it has died out before it's even half done. We're about to start, as of recording this, we're about to start the Joey stage, but there doesn't feel like there's a lot of things to like have coming in later in the event, which sometimes they get right, a lot of the time they get wrong. But in this event, it feels particularly bad because there's only 7 characters, and the lack of farmables towards the end is... it's not great. It's not great. I think it's especially not helped by the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have that much past content. So even someone that's new to the game, they'd only have to farm Battle Rush Kaiba, which you don't farm, you just beat the stages, and then New Year Kaiba and the Green Kaiba. That's about it, because they didn't bring back the farming stage for the like old school Yu-Gi-Oh event they did, where you could get copies of Anzu. They instead put her on a different stage, but maybe it would have made more sense to bring that back, because that gave you that little free-to-play gacha that gave you loads of goodies, and they decided not to do that stage. So I don't know, but I feel like I've tried to balance this event in a way that there's something to look forward to throughout the event, and I've decided to put the Catastrophe class at the end. I honestly don't think they're going to do this. This is what I would do. I don't think they're going to do this because I think they like to have the Catastrophe stage out a little bit earlier, so that people can show off their limiteds a little bit. And it's not like they haven't done it before, but I think typically speaking, when they have done it and they've released either a Transcendent or an Ultimate and then a Catastrophe later, there's normally another Catastrophe to do from another part of the event, whether that's because they're releasing 2 limiteds or whether that's because the event is built around them having 2 catastrophes. So I don't know that they're going to do this, but I think it would be nice, and I think Anishi is definitely going to be a catastrophe, but whether they do it like an ultimate and then a later catastrophe stage, or whether it's all together, remains to be seen. But this is what I would do, and I think it would work. I think it would work quite well. He is undoubtedly worthy of being a catastrophe stage, and realistically in this event there's no other candidates, so it's definitely going to be him. Following that, the release of a points event. Typically these points events require you to go and collect something, and in this event there's not really many options. The 2 options I came up with, well, the one I think would make the most sense is Tomoe's diary, but I would also say it would make a lot of sense to have the Hakubaiko perfume, which is the one that sort of brings Kenshin to his senses during this arc. I think there's a very good chance they choose that one, but either way it's just going to be you farming something to get something. It's not going to give any new characters or new legend summon or anything like that. It's just going to give you some luxury rewards. At a stretch they might do an event like this and it would give you a legend summon of the old man, who, spoilers again, is revealed later to be Tomoe's father. They could do that because he kind of fits that role in this arc, but again, I think we're cutting down more than going up, so maybe 2 legend summons isn't too much of an ask, but I think only 1, and I don't think it's going to be him. Next up, Transcendent class event, we have Kamishimoemon Higashidani, or Sonosuke's dad. Again, it's a bit hard to call it a strong pick, and I dare say they might go another way with this, and instead of having him have one of the other random fodder characters that's part of Anishi's organization, entirely possible. But I would rather have him 100%. I think he, as far as, you know, being a likable character, being a character you'd want to play with, he's way higher on the list than any of them. And obviously he would be countered by Sonosuke, so he would have to be yellow. But again, these wouldn't be hard counters because they are Transcendent class events and you don't really need a gacha unit to counter them. So they'd probably have something pretty good about them that is also countering the stage. For example, I think Yahiko technically would counter Anishi, who obviously would have to be blue. And then Kenshin would also counter Anishi because Anishi's blue. And then Yahiko would have some kind of small counter against the Transcendent class event. And then Sonosuke would counter Kamishimoemon, but probably has some kind of support that's like really good for PvP or something like that. And yeah, it's a Transcendent class event, so not much to say there. But then next up we have Legendary Quest. Now you may remember me saying earlier this is a Jinshu and Remembrance arc event, so this is the only part I have here that is from Remembrance. And I did kind of play around with the idea of us getting maybe Tomoe as a playable unit, but I can't really see how they do that because she doesn't have any action scenes really, except for one rather unfortunate one that ends with her dying. So it would be a bit difficult to label her as a candidate for any kind of gacha or farmable unit. A Legend Summon makes a lot more sense, but then it feels a bit weird that this event is titled Jinshu and Remembrance Arc when Remembrance is not going to have a lot going for it. Now, there is an argument to be had for the rest of the members of the group in the past version, because that's technically a stage idea you could definitely do. I mean, part of the arc is Kenshin going to fight them, and he's having his senses stolen away from him. He's disrupting his swordsman's sense, his hearing, his sight, his sense of smell, whatever. So they've done everything they can to try and weaken him so that they can kill him. So you could definitely do some kind of challenge stage based around that, and I would be all for it. And I actually think that would be really cool. But I don't know if they will. And I think a Legend Summon stage is probably a lot more likely. But I've been shocked before. So the boss of the organization, maybe, or Tomoe as a farmable unit, has some potential. But I think a legendary quest much more likely with her being a legend summon. I've also chucked this in here. Challenge event of the Sushin, which is the four gods. Suzaku, Seiryu, Yahiko, and Genbu. As I mentioned before, kind of fodder characters that Watsuki came up with because he had to, because he needed the four main supports of Kenshin to have somebody to fight. And I think this would make perfect sense as like an enemy only type stage, challenge type stage. You know, going back to how we had those like JoJo free turn challenges, you could have one of these, one of each color, each countered by, you know, Aoshi, Saito, Sonosuke, and Yahiko. And they could have some kind of gimmick to each of them. The sprites wouldn't be that hard to make for enemy only because you wouldn't have to animate them that much. And also, the only minor changes between each one is the marking on the head and the weapons they're using. So, I think it would make a lot of sense. Again, this probably interchangeable with the Remembrance arc idea for the challenge stage. And I think that would be kind of cool as well. But I think this is more likely because it would probably be a lot less work. You wouldn't have to design too many new sprites. It would just be one, and then you'd slightly edit that one. You know, it would just be for like rewards and stuff. It wouldn't be any farmable characters from it or anything. We have had unique challenge stages in the past, like the Hades one, like the bench clearing brawl one from the Kochikame event. They definitely have done stages like that, but I feel like it's been a while, so they might not do it this time. And then I've gone with a unity battle to round things off. In theory, to round things off, the Catastrophe class event, depending on if they held it later or not, might come later. But assuming the Catastrophe class event comes with the Ultimate class event, the Unity battle to round things off, and our 8th and final character will be the all grown up, not really, he's not all grown up, he's like 15 years old, but the man who caught 1,000 blades, Myojin Yahiko. The Unity battle would be Kenshin actually, but the farmable unit from it would be Myojin Yahiko, the grown-up one. And my idea for this event was, because I do feel like this will probably be the final Kenshin Feature Festival, and that's not to say that there aren't more candidates to come from Kenshin, you know, characters like Anji definitely could have made their way in. I am desperate for a V2 Kamiya Kaoru from the battle during the Shishio Makoto arc, because that is a sick moment for her character, and at the moment she's only a 3-star. Does evolve to 6-star, but that doesn't really help her too much. So it would be cool to see her as a V2. I mean, there are definitely more candidates from the content that we do have. And I think a lot of people were disappointed that from the Oniwabanshu, we only got Aoshi, and we even had that Unity battle with Takeda Kanryu, and it didn't drop him or any of the characters from the group, which was a bit sad. But I think this is the most likely thing that this will be the final feature festival for Rurouni Kenshin, and this all grown up Myojin Yahiko will be sort of like a good way to round off that event. And it would be cool if the Unity battle with Kenshin as the boss, Yahiko as the farmable, if depending on which character you bought, it would change the event in some way. Like, for example, if you bought Aoshi, it would show Kenshin versus Aoshi. and it would change Kenshin's type so you had an advantage. Or if you brought along Yahiko, it would show Kenshin training Yahiko. Or if you bought this new adult Yahiko, it would show their little moment at the end of the series. Little things like that would be really cool. Again, I'm asking them to put a lot of work in here, but at the same time, I do feel like this will be the last one. That's if they don't cover any of the like spin-offs and stuff, which technically they probably wouldn't. They probably shouldn't. But you never really know, because they do kind of occasionally cover something that maybe you wouldn't expect them to. So we shall see. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and I think that would be a solid event. There would be little bits to farm each time throughout the event. You just space those out throughout the event, and then at the back end of the event, where you've got the not as many farmables and you've got the Unity battle going, that's when you start the countdown to the 100 Fest. And I can't wait to do my predictions for the 100 Fest, because I can't wait to be horrifically wrong. So that'll be interesting. But that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think is going to come from this event? Are you looking forward to it? Will you summon? That's a good question, because I don't think I'm going to. But we'll see. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.